Well, we're just finishing up finally on the north section of the railroad, the bridge over the River Wye. We've just got a couple of small things left to do at the north end of the railroad at the bridge over the River Wye, and that whole north end will be finished. There's a small amount of scenery at the far left end of this section that needs to be finished, and then a little bit of touch up on some of the color, and we will be done. Now, the ballast, which is down, one of the things I do with the ballast is if I'm working in a section, I can just pick that up and come in here with the shop vac and vacuum up all of the ballast into a bucket. And then when I'm done working, I can put the ballast right back down. So that's been my process, is just take the ballast up if I'm painting or something. So this is the unfinished section. It's just at the far left end of the north part of the railroad. And you can see here I've started roughing in the scenery here with some mortar mix with color in it. And I'm just going to get this little section finished down here. And then there's a little small area to our left here where you can see that's still unfinished. Last year I put some just basic mortar mix in there with no color. Just as a way of building that section up, and now I need to add mortar mix over the top of that. I've got another retaining wall to finish right here. You can see that I've already got the wire cut out and stapled in place here. Now I need to apply mortar mix and carve a field stone retaining wall in here. There's the matching retaining wall at the other end, which is much larger, and then of course the two abutments underneath the bridge. And I want all four of those things to sort of match. I've already finished the stonework here to the right of the retaining wall. I want to make sure that the scenery to the left of the retaining wall matches into the other, so it doesn't look like it was done at two different times, even though in fact it was. Now I'm doing all of this during monsoon season, so we get these afternoon rainstorms quite often, so I was working kind of quickly here because I fully expected to have a light rainstorm come down on top of all of this here in a couple of hours, and sure enough the sky was clouding up, but it was clouding up quite dramatically. Yes. And well, instead of a nice light rainstorm like we've been getting the last few days, we got a full-on gully washer rain and hailstorm, dropping an inch of rain in just a matter of a few hours. And where usually a little water coming down on top of my stonework wouldn't have much of an impact, in this particular case it was washing all of my hard work away, and I was assuming that I would have to come in here and redo this whole thing. Because you can see here it's pitting it, and the bottom is washing out, and it's just, well, it's doing a lot of damage to it. I'm not sure how this works, but for whatever reason and however it works, the very first thing it washed out was all of the color. So we were right back to regular mortar color. In the area immediately below the retaining wall, it prevented the cement from hardening, and it was all crumbly and soft, almost coming away looking like dirt. So I knew that this would all just come loose and wash away. That would all have to be redone. But the other area down here dried really hard. It's just been heavily pitted, and a lot of the material sort of washed out of it. But interestingly, I think what's left isn't all that bad looking. I think I can just sort of work with this. After all, isn't this nature's own weathering when a big rainstorm comes along and just tears apart your scenery. Isn't that what happens in the real world? And so as I'm looking at this, I'm going, yeah, you know, I think this is actually finished scenery. I need to get the color back into it. I'll dilute down some house paint and let that soak in here. But I actually rather like this. It sort of reminds me of Echo Canyon up north of here. Now, in the area where I wanted to patch into this under the retaining wall, and then of course the retaining wall itself, I needed to brush away all of the loose material. I can't very well be putting new mortar mix down on top of this sandy gritty stuff or it'll never stick. So the first thing I needed to do was clean this whole area up and make sure any loose material has been dislodged, and then vacuum the whole thing up with my shop vac. And then one last go here with the garden hose and a nozzle on it to clean everything up completely. So first up, I'm going to do the retaining wall. I mixed up a very small batch of colored mortar mix and then spread that into my wire, trying to get that on there as smooth as possible. And then while it's still very wet and soft, start pressing some mortar lines into the stonework here, creating the stonework. It starts to set up rather rapidly, and so toward the end of that, you're not so much pressing the mortar lines in there as you are carving them in. This is, of course, the exact same process I used for creating the bridge abutments under the bridge. So if you want a little more detailed explanation of this, take a look at that video. Here's a link. Then adding in the color, here again I'm using my cheap acrylic paints from the craft store as well as the latex house paints, very dilute so that it soaks into the concrete, which at this point is still wet. I should say mortar mix, not concrete. I kind of skip around with color so that the stones come in as different color. That isn't to say I paint each one individually. Well, I do, but not with an individual color. I'll just put some color over here, and then while that color's still on my brush over here, and then over here, and then over here, so that each stone has a very unique feel to it. More weathering and coloring will be applied over the top of this, but this is the good basic color. This is basically what it's going to look like. And now finishing up the bottom of the hill where I got rained out earlier. My intention was to continue working right down the hill all the way to the bottom of the hill, but well, Mother Nature had other plans. And as they used to say in the old advertising, don't mess with Mother Nature. Same process I always use. I just kind of put a smooth coating on here, giving it the shape that I want, and then as it's setting up, I can come in here and lightly carve it to give it a little more of a stone finish. And then, of course, trying to match somewhat the section that was damaged by the rain so that it all looks contiguous, if you will. So the next step is to get some weathering and some final color onto everything. Here at the retaining wall, I started by just putting some washes of watered down burnt umber so it would sort of soak back into the lines between the stones. Also at this point, applying some colors over the top of the colored cement, again really watered down so that it soaks in. First and foremost so that all the different sections sort of blend together, but also to create some natural look, some variation in color across the stone so it's not all just the same brown color. And now doing that same trick with really, really watered down burnt umber, just put a whole lot of really watered down material up at the top and let it run down naturally and soak back into the cracks and stain the surface of the stone so that it looks like natural weathering, you know, the natural discoloration of the stone. As this dries out, a lot of the effect that you've put on just disappears, and so just keep applying coat upon coat over the top until you get the look that you want, remembering that if you go too far, there's no backing up. So just keep doing it and analyzing it and saying, okay, it's perfect just like that. I'm ready to stop. As I was doing the cement work, I was using different variations of the colors that I can mix with the mortar mix. More yellow, more brown, more black, so that I had variation already in the cement work. And what I'm trying to do now is make it all feel like one actual mountain as opposed to individual sections. And outdoor railroading is always about maintenance. So over here on the section that's several years old, some of the paint was starting to peel. You can see where there's a little peeling paint. And again, I don't necessarily find that unattractive. It just looks kind of natural. But some of the color here on the retaining wall has faded. So I just want to bring those colors back up a little bit and touch up some of these areas. You know, while I'm working out here, I might as well just touch this up a little, do a little, what you would say, routine maintenance on this stuff. Fresh coat of paint, if you will. Same paints that I have been using, the Bear house paint, just outdoor grade, exterior grade latex house paints. You can buy these little sample jars over at Home Depot for $10 or something. It's a lot cheaper than buying a gallon of paint. And then the little craft paints too. That's how everything was painted originally. Again, make sure everything is highly dilute. Use a lot of water. All this stuff is water-based, and just make sure it's really, really thin and watered down, and it will soak into the mortar mix. If you remember from a couple years ago, a little experimentation, I tried spritzing water on the cement and then applying the color, and that was a disaster because having the cement already wet prevents it from soaking in. You want to use a really watered down paint and apply that over completely dry cement, and then it just sucks it in like a sponge. And of course, some of this color will float on the surface and not really get sucked down in there. And what that means is it will peel and flake and fall off over time. But again, that can look pretty natural. One nice thing about it, weather looks like weather, whether it's natural stone weathering or your cement mix weathering it, it all still kind of looks natural. And then again, coming back with super dilute burnt umber and let that just drizzle and run down in the cracks and across the surface of the stone and so on. It gives it that nice look of desert varnish, if you will. In this case, I think it's perfectly fine. I enjoy the effect of spritzing the area down with a light mist of water so that it helps the paint run down. In this case, if the cement's already wet, it won't soak in, and that will help it to just run down. So in this case, I will spritz the area with a little spray bottle before applying the burnt umber. Here again, as this dries, it tends to just completely vanish, and you're going, I thought I put, a runny coat down this thing, but as it dries, it tends to soak in, maybe, I don't know. But as it dries, it tends to disappear. So I'll put as many as 10 coats of this stuff on. Just let it run down, repeat, let it run down, repeat. I've been debating doing the trick with the rockite mix and applying mortar lines here. It worked so well on the retaining walls, the abutments under the bridge, and I really like that. So I may do that here and on the other retaining wall as well. I really, really like the effect of these burnt umber washes where it soaks down into the cracks. It can really bring out detail. It really has a nice natural look, like, water has been running down on this for years and years and years, staining the rock. I think it's just a wonderful effect. So here's the finished version of the touched up area down here, getting rid of the peeling paint and faded paint and bringing it back looking a lot more like it did when it was first painted a couple years ago. And with that, I think everything's wrapped up down here at the north end. All of the new scenery is in place, the old scenery, the colors have been touched up, and we're ready to move on to our next project, which is going to be finishing and reworking the area over here at the Grapevine Village. I want to redo some of these lights. I want to put in the new street lights and just some wonderful changes over here at Grapevine Village. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this series on the bridge over the River Wye, and I hope you want to stay with us as we get over to the Grapevine Village. And to do so, please subscribe by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, I'm not sure how you found this video on the internet. I hope you didn't find it boring. And Karen and I will see you here on Sunday with a Sunday show. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.